Benny Leonard was not the first Jewish boxing star to come out of the Lower East Side. That distinction belongs to a fighter by the name of Leech Cross. That was his fighting name.
Leech Cross was the first Jewish boxing hero in America on the East Coast.
He was the idol of the ghetto. He was an action fighter, but he was a good boxer. He was one of the greatest drawing cards of any boxer in New York City back in the early part of the 20th century.
They used to say about Leech Cross, when he came to fight, half the crowd came to see him killed, and the other half came to bury him. But live so long they didn't. In a career of something like 150 bouts, he only lost 10 times. Leech in some ways was, you could almost say he was an anomaly among the Jewish fighters, because he came from it seems, a solid middle-class background. What we call in Yiddish a balabatische home, bourgeois, respectable family.
What makes Leech's story so interesting is that aside from being one of the leading lightweight contenders of his era, which was the early 1900s, he also graduated from the NYU Dental School. He was a dentist.
In one case, he would end up fighting a guy named K.O. Brown. He unloosened all of K.O.'s teeth in the 10th round, and the next morning, K.O. Brown is in a dental chair, peering down on him, plier in hand, is a guy named Dr. Lewis Wallach, a.k.a. Leech Cross.
One of Leech Cross's biggest fans was a skinny little Benjamin Lerner, who would later become the great Benny Leonard.
Leech Cross was his hero.
Leonard would say, "In the yard of the little pool parlor, the youth of his neighborhood gathered daily, and there they'd often discuss the greatness of Leech Cross, our idol. I began sparring to imitate Leech."
Benny Leonard's real name was Benjamin Leiner.
Benny Leonard, whose name was not Leonard, it was Linier, and he changed it to hide from his mother the fact that he was boxing. But he got the name Leonard, he claimed, from Eddie Leonard, an old minstrel.
Leonard's story follows the typical script.
He came from a Yiddish-speaking home. His parents were poor people from Eastern Europe, and his home life was a Jewish life.
Benny Leonard was a scrawny kid growing up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And like many young boys, he was bullied. I mean, he was afraid to go out of the house because every time he ventured into an Irish neighborhood, he got beat up.
Benny Leonard probably got into boxing because of anti-Semitism. Raised down on Avenue C, he would always run into Italian gangs and Irish gangs who were protecting their turf.
Leonard wrote, "On 8th Street, I was free to play in the sun-baked cobblestones for 200 yards. Outside of that distance was no man's land, and fraught with real danger. One day I was trying to sneak to the grocer with a quarter clutched in my hand, when about half a dozen members of the 6th Street boys appeared and grabbed me. They bounced me around in charismatic style and knocked me all the way home." His doting mother, Minnie, consoled him, but Uncle Max was less sympathetic. He was tired of seeing his nephew beaten up, and took him to the Silver Hill Club to learn how to box.
His uncle finally said, "Enough is enough. I'm going to take you to a local gym, and I'm going to give you boxing instruction." And little Benny, I think, was about 10 years old at the time. And since boxing was everywhere, and boxing gyms were everywhere, it's very easy to take a young boy for free instruction. He turned out to be a natural, and he fell in love with the sport.
By the age of 11, he had become the champion of 8th Street, and the protector of his neighborhood peers.
And he was so good that whomsoever in the neighborhood, feeling themselves to be a promoter, would pit him against whomsoever was the battling, if you will, protector of the other gang, charge a penny for it. He'd come in and watch, and he'd win all those fights. So yes, anti-Semitism was how he got into the ring, because he was really answering back for it.
After a month's practice, Buck Arrington took me into his hand and gave me my first fight. as a 108-pound flyweight with a lad named Mickey Finnegan.
When he was fighting professionally as a 14-year-old, that meant he had already been in like 1 million street fights and also the settlement houses, boxing tournaments in the settlement houses. So he was already a hardened veteran when he was 14 years old.
Benny won the first 3 rounds, but his nose was bleeding so badly that the referee stopped the bout and declared Finnegan the winner. Nevertheless, Leonard pocketed $4 for the fight.
He instinctively understood that there was more to this sport than just slugging. And because he was very slight and wasn't strong, he developed a very quick style. He used speed to win his early fights.
Leonard fought 26 times in the first year as a pro. On training days, he would leave the house early in the morning, telling his mother he was going to look for work. On fight nights, he would pretend to go to bed early and then sneak out. His father, Gerson, worked in a sweatshop 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to support his wife and 8 children.
Boxing provided that help for the families.
Every 4-round preliminary boxer could make more money in one bout than his sweatshop laboring father or mother could earn in a week.
For young fighters, it was a way to help their families, even though it was difficult because a lot of them were afraid even to tell their parents. I think the Jewish mother whose son came in and said, I'm decided to become a boxer, or she found out he's a boxer, I don't know what would be worse, to say that I'm a gangster, you know, I'm working for Murder Incorporated. It was not good. It just was not something that you were anxious to tell a Jewish mom. There's a famous story of Benny Leonard coming home after one fight, and he didn't get many black eyes, but he came home with a black eye, and he couldn't keep it from his parents anymore.
One day I reached the age of 16, I went out and boxed a fellow and received $20 for this fight and a black eye. My dad came in, and he said, look at your face, fighting again for what? I reached in my pocket and brought out a $20 bill and put it in his hand. My dad showed my mother cried, she didn't care about the money. My father turned to me, put the $20 bill into his pocket, pat me on the shoulder and said, Benny, my boy, it's all right. When are you going to fight again?
And Benny boxed and boxed and boxed 221 recorded times. The irony is he only lost 4 times, all to Irishmen.
In an era where sluggers were at the forefront of the sport, Leonard's highly mobile style and analytical approach breathed new life into pugilism, while helping him dominate perhaps the deepest pool of lightweight talent the sport has ever known.
No, Benny Leonard was never a brawler. He was a combination boxer, and a damn good one, and a puncher, and one hell of a one.
He tailor-made his punches to accommodate the opposition. That's where the science comes in.
He's like a matador in the ring. And that's the kind of sophisticated stuff that, you know, a lot of the Jewish fight fans really respected.
They said about Benny Leonard that he never made the same mistake twice.
Boxing historian Gilbert Odd wrote, Leonard was coolness himself in the ring because he knew how to defend himself. He usually left the ring unmarked. Because he kept himself in peak condition, he could travel 10 fast rounds and look as fresh as when he started.
Benny Leonard had brilliantine hair, which is like Brill cream, just slicked back. And he prided himself that nobody could muss up his hair. That's how skilled he was in the ring. And disaster to those who tried.
In one case, a fighter had the chutzpah to mess with his hair, and in no time at all, he was on his back and out in a semi-comatose state.
His approach was so, in a way, you could even call it intellectual. He broke down boxing to a science. He made it into a science, and he studied it incessantly. He lived it 24/7. Even to the point where after he was through his workout, he would sit and watch 4-round preliminary boxers in the gym. And Ray Arcel, the great trainer, saw him doing this and came over and said, you're the most accomplished boxer in the country. Why are you watching these beginners, these four? He says, well, you never know. Sometimes they could do something by mistake that I can use. I mean, this was an unusual person who saw boxing as basically a physical game of chess.
In the early 20th century, it If a fight did not end in a knockout, the newspaper reporters covering the fight chose the winner. If there was a consensus, the fighter was awarded a newspaper decision. But the world title could not change hands through a newspaper decision. The champion had to be knocked out. Leonard found himself on the wrong side of this rule in his first championship bout against Freddie Welsh in Madison Square Garden in 1916. Leonard entered the ring a month shy of his 20th birthday. He outboxed the champ for over 10 rounds, but failed to knock him out. Leonard was awarded the newspaper decision, but not the title. They fought again 4 months later at the Washington Park Athletic Club in Brooklyn. The New York Sun and Associated Press declared Leonard the winner, but the majority of the paper sided with Welsh. Leonard fought 19 times in the next 10 months to set up another shot at Welsh. The rubber match took place on May 28, 1917, at Manhattan's Casino, across the street from the Polo Grounds at 8th Avenue and 155th Street in Harlem.
Benny finally figured him out. For the first time in Welsh's 168 fights, he'd been stopped by Benny Leonard in the 9th round. Benny was now the lightweight champion.
The first New Yorker to win a world championship. The next day, one reporter wrote, "Leonard moved with the grace of a ballet dancer. He wore an air of arrogance that belonged to royalty. We've never seen anyone better than Benny Leonard."
For many of the Jewish prize fighters, moving to Harlem was a sign of upward mobility. So when Benny Leonard won the title, the first thing he did to finally reward his mother for all the tsuris that he had caused her, he bought his mother a fancy place in Harlem.
Leonard reeled off another 18 victories in 1917 over top competition. When the U.S. entered World War I, Leonard joined the Army and stopped fighting for 4 months.
Skip! Jab him! Cross him! Hook him! Uppercut!
At Camp Upton in Long Island, the lightweight champion of the world schooled the 77th Division in hand-to-hand combat.
I'm the teacher, remember that.
Leonard went on to win 12 more bouts in 1918. In fact, Leonard would not lose a fight between 1917 and 1922.